fixed, or is it still pointing?
Evening, everybody. Welcome to the Planning Control Committee, Thursday the 14th November 2024. We are streaming live on YouTube. Welcome to everybody in the public gallery. If you could keep your comments down, please, if that's okay, everybody. I know it's going to be a contentious on this one, but thank you all. Just as a point of order for the rest of the committee, item 7.1, Charnwood Street, has been removed from the agenda.
Or will it be coming back to committee?
It's been delegated.
All right. I thought it would be coming to the next meeting.
It was coming to this meeting, and then Councillor Khan, who brought it to the meeting, he's withdrawn his objections. Yeah, so it's gone delegated.
Right. Right.
Okay. Thank you. Item 1, apologies.
Chair, I've got apologies from Councillor Graves.
Thank you very much. Any late items? There are none. Declarations of interest? There are none. Minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of October 2024. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Appeal decisions. Ian, over to you.
Many thanks, Chair, and good evening, everybody. Only 3 items, but five decisions on your list. The top one, pavement adjacent to 3 and 5 to 9 Albion Street, is combined with an advert application just beneath it, and the same at 46 and 48 St Peter Street. The proposals were freestanding telephone apparatus with an advert on one side and a telephone on the other. The first one at Albion Street, the inspector felt that by virtue of its position on a commercial frontage away from sensitive heritage assets, it was an acceptable proposition, and so allowed that. James is just displaying the photo montage at the moment. And then on St Peter Street, the inspector disagreed because of the setting of, it's in the Green Lane Conservation Area, setting of listed buildings, felt that its position on that particular street frontage was unacceptable for those reasons. So worth a read, those inspectors' letters. And then the one at the bottom, at 41 Merton Drive, Mackworth, it was actually an appeal against a condition that would be imposed relative to noise levels. So in line with the tests in the planning practice guidance for the reasonableness and the precision of conditions, the inspector amended the condition to control noise levels and include mitigation if necessary to ensure that the neighbour at number 1 wasn't unreasonably affected by the siting of that heat pump in that location shown. So that was allowed on appeal, Chair. So quite a useful decision. There should be an air source heat pump application coming to a forthcoming meeting that's been proposed by Councillor Kerr. So it's interesting stuff, worth a read if you've got 5 minutes, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks for that. Looking forward to that one. Councillor Kerr, yes.
Yeah, I was wanting to ask about the public realm ones and actually the conditions to go with them, because I'm walking through the city centre at the moment. We've got at least 2 kiosk-y units which are no longer in use, are sitting there with barriers around them. Is there anything we can do about conditioning for the removal of things in that sort of location if they're no longer actively being used?
Are they being removed presently, Councillor Kerr, or are they just...
They're just sitting there with barriers around them. It doesn't say, I'm going to be moved, you know, this is about to be demolished, this is about to be moved. It's just an obstruction in the public realm. Along, I think there's one on Peter Street and there's one on East Street.
I'll look into those, Councillor Kerr, and report back. But these weren't associated with These weren't removal and replacement facilities. They were just brand new proposals, so they were dealt with accordingly. But I'll look into those. If telephone boxes are redundant, they generally do require, they generally are removed.
These weren't telephone boxes, I don't think. I think they were sort of magic money machines sitting in the middle of the road or something like that. Yes.
Thanks, Ian. You again, Ian. I think Development Control Performance Quarter 2.
Nothing to add, Chair, aside from there's a slight omission in one of the final paragraphs. Financial and value for money issues talks about the planning guarantee and the 26-week deadline we've got for refunding fees if we've not secured extensions of time and issued a decision. There's also now a 16-week period for non-major applications that we work to. So we monitor those decisions, ensure we've got extensions of time, work with applicants, but of course try and get applications determined far quicker than that, so we're not in that period of 16 or 26 weeks where we are potentially forced to refund a fee. So that's the only omission there, Chair. Everything else is as per the normal format, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Any questions on that? Councillor Kerr.
Right, the top of page 2, Chair, has the paragraph 4.2, has the July to September actual performance changes. Now, this is obviously summer holiday period. We'll have had officers who were on holiday quite reasonably at that time. But there's no particular comment as to whether that is the reason for the drop in performance, and whether it's now back up to where we expect it to be, or whether there is something else happening in the department that we ought to know about.
Quite simply, Chair, we only had 2 major applications. One was in time, one was out of time, so hence the 50% return on majors. But in terms of the numbers determined and the numbers received, we're up on both counts, Councillor Kerr. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. Item 7, application to be considered, 3 Cortland Gardens, Ulverston. Julia, please, once you've settled.
Thank you, Chair. The application relates to number 3 Cortland Gardens, a modern detached dwelling situated along a residential cul-de-sac off Shardlow Road in Ulverston. The application seeks permission to use the property as a small-scale children's care home for up to 2 children within a C2 use class. The proposal relates to the use of the building only, and no physical changes or extensions are proposed. The application property is a 2-storey, 3-bedroom house. The property has a short driveway on its northern side, providing 2 tandem off-street car parking spaces. There is a detached garage set to the rear of the property. The wider cul-de-sac is comprised of detached dwellings of varying sizes. There are no parking restrictions along the road, and the cul-de-sac is served by a turning head at its southern end. The application property has been in use as a C2 children's care home housing 1 child since May 2024. However, the application seeks to use the property as a care home for up to 2 children. The supporting information within the application explains that the property is to be the main residence of the children, seeking to provide the normality of a single household, with staff providing 24-hour care. In terms of staffing numbers, the submission states that care would be provided by up to 6 members of staff working on a shift basis, with no more than 2 members of staff on shift at any given time. Staff changeovers would occur twice daily at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Although wider visits to the property would vary, it's suggested that 1 cared-for person would have 1 visit per professional per day between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. A draft management plan has also been submitted in support of the application. As stated within the report, we've received 24 objections in relation to the proposed development. Since the report was published, we've also received an additional 6 representations which raise similar issues to those summarised in the report. They relate to concerns about the overall number of care homes in the area, increased traffic, parking and highway safety concerns, impact on infrastructure, noise disturbance, crime and antisocial behaviour issues, concerns about littering and fly tipping, and fears that the suggested planning conditions won't address the problems raised. In considering this use, it has to be recognised that there's been a change in recent decades with a shift to providing care in the community. As a result, old-style large institutions and care homes have been replaced with smaller residential units. Many of these small-scale children's care homes have been provided within residential areas, as the use is residential, and there is a need for children to grow up in the community. In terms of the principle of the use in this location, there are no local plan policies which seek to direct care homes to certain areas of the city or restrict the overall number of care homes in a certain area. It's noted that some of the neighbouring properties already provide supported living accommodation for adults. However, such uses are generally deemed to be appropriate within a residential area and can generally operate within a typical C3 dwelling without requiring a change of use. The proposal before you would essentially replace an existing C3 dwelling with an alternative form of residential use in a residential area. The site is sustainably located with good access to key facilities and is therefore, in principle, an acceptable location for the siting of a small-scale residential care home. There are considered to be no overarching planning policies reasons to resist the principle of the use in this location. In terms of wider amenity issues, it is acknowledged that there is significant local opposition to the use of the building. The objections have been noted and summarised within the report. However, it should be recognised that the planning system seeks to manage the use of the land and buildings only and cannot control the behaviour of individuals, including any children within the care home. Any objections based on such issues are not material and are beyond the remit of the planning authority. They are matters and issues that would be the responsibility and duty of other relevant authorities and agencies to deal with, which includes ensuring correct management of the accommodation is achieved. Having the appropriate planning consent will not in itself enable a residential children's care home to continue operating if it does not also meet other regulatory requirements, including those set by Ofsted. From a planning perspective, the question to be addressed is whether the use of the house as a small-scale children's care home with a maximum of 2 children is compatible with the surrounding area, which in this case is predominantly residential in nature. As highlighted in the report, in general terms, it is considered that vehicle movements and the comings and goings associated with staff, visitors and 2 children are unlikely to be significantly different from those associated with a typical family dwelling of this size, which could accommodate 2 adults and 2 children, including possibly adult children who have their own vehicles. No objections have been raised by the Highway Authority in terms of parking or highway safety issues, and no objections have been raised by colleagues within the Environmental Protection Team in terms of noise. The overall intensity of the use can be controlled by conditions restricting the number of cared-for children to no more than 2, together with staff numbers and shift changes in line with the submitted information. A management plan condition has also been recommended to control details of management processes to help reduce the likelihood of on-street parking. For example, appointment systems for visitors and measures to encourage staff to travel by alternative means of transport. Use of the premises as a children's care home can also be secured via condition to prevent any of the uses within Class C2 being implemented without planning permission. Overall, the site is located within an established residential area with good access to local facilities, including schools, recreation spaces, retail and other services. As such, it's considered to be an acceptable location for the proposed use to be sited. With the measures in place to be controlled through condition, it is the view of the local planning authority that the scheme would not lead to unacceptable impacts on highway safety. And the impact on parking and general amenity issues would also be tolerable. And finally, I'm reminded that we as a council have a corporate parenting responsibility, and where better to locate such a residential care facility than in a residential location. The proposal is deemed to comply with the relevant adopted local plan policies as quoted within the report and the advice contained within the NPPF. As a result, it is recommended that planning permission is granted subject to the suggested conditions. And you have 3 speakers on this particular application, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. First speaker, Mr. Cabba. You have 3 minutes, sir.
J24 Resourcing Limited is a local company providing care services on behalf of the council to place children in need of care. In the course of the planning process, we have worked proactively with the council to address planning-related queries. The information provided so far demonstrates that all planning-related queries and concerns have been addressed, including highways, waste collection, amenity. The use of the property as a C2 use has been demonstrated that in terms of functionality, it is not dissimilar from use of the property as a C3 dwelling house. In terms of highways, while there's on-site parking, staff will be encouraged to travel to work via walking, bicycle, public transportation. Cycle parking has been provided within the cartilage of the site. In terms of visitors, visitors are only allowed on an appointment basis. Now, these would be normally in daytime, between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. This is not dissimilar to the use of the property as a three-bedroom dwelling, where there are no restrictions on the amount or frequency of visitors. The applicant has also been very keen to work with the neighbors to address non-planning issues, such as we've had queries about installation of CCTV. It is common to find residential properties in this day and age installing CCTV, such as ring door cams and doorbells for safety and security. We've also had some neighbors query about bin collection, where some neighbors have complained that the bins are left on neighboring properties.
Mr. Cabot, could you just switch your microphone off, please? Could we just keep this to side? The speakers have got 3 minutes to speak, and you're in there in the public gallery. You're not allowed to speak from the public gallery. So if you just let all the speakers speak, please, and then we'll discuss the application in the committee. Thank you very much. Carry on, Mr. Cabot.
Thank you. Yeah, so in relation to the bins, some neighbors have complained that the bins are left on neighboring properties on bin days. But we all know that during bin collection days, the bin collectors, when they've collected the bins, they'll just leave them there, and the respective households will take their bins back to their properties. We can confirm that these are returned to the property as soon as possible. We've also had an instance of where a neighbor has approached the young person asking sensitive questions regarding the care issues. We feel these can be addressed in the proper channels, as it would be threatening to the young person. In conclusion, it is maintained that there is little difference in planning terms between the proposed C2 use and the previous C3 use of the dwelling, of course subject to approval. The carers working on a rota basis would effectively live at the dwelling house to provide 24-hour care as a single household. The comings and goings associated with the use would normally...
So that's time, Mr. Cabot. That's time, Mr. Cabot. I allowed you a few extra seconds because of the disturbance. Okay, yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Right,
thank you. Could you switch your microphone off, please? Thank you. Next speaker, Mr. Schenker. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I've been contacted by almost every resident on Cortland Gardens who have raised concerns about this planning application. And as we've heard, for context, this is a small residential cul-de-sac which already has 2 operational care facilities located in a very small street comprising of just 11 dwellings. This property has been in use since May as a residential care facility, crucially without enjoying any planning permission. So I think that raises questions about the suitability of this provider. This has, in fact, though, afforded residents the opportunity to see what life would be like with the operation of this facility, and it significantly disrupted the lives of those on Cortland Gardens. So thank the applicant for almost, doing this illegally by creating this care facility. There is a difference between C2 and C3, and that's why we're here today. It's almost been a try before you buy, and overwhelmingly residents have rejected this and saying they don't want to buy it because of the significant impact it's having on their lives. I've been there and had a look myself. Just going into some of those issues, if that's okay, Chair. Increased traffic and noise pollution, light pollution, repeated visits from the police and other professional organisations. It's a complete illusion to think there's only 2 carers here at any one time and the occasional visit. It's a small, quiet cul-de-sac with many, many cars visiting this property on a regular basis. And at the moment, I believe there's only 1 child being cared for. Imagine there's 2, it'll be a lot worse. Repeated visits from like I say, the police or the blue light services during the day and hours of darkness, which is disturbing residents. Trespassing on private property by staff members and residents. This is denied by the applicant, yet I've seen evidence that this has taken place. And a total lack of communication on the operator's behalf around these premises with any of the residents. I indeed myself have written to the operator and still now, 2 weeks on, have not even had an acknowledgement, let alone a response. I believe there's many planning aspects and policy which this could be refused on. I think highways have got this totally wrong, and let's not forget they have got things wrong in Derby in the highways department in the past. Duffield Road bus lane, which might be coming back, Kingsway retail park for one.
Mr. Shanky, can you please keep to the application that being considered, please? Thank you very much.
I hope you stop the clock, Chair. So just summing up, this is totally not suitable for the area, it's impacted residents, and the fact that we've been able to evidence the impact in the last few months demonstrates that this is not suitable for this location and it should be thrown out.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Wills, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Living close to a 16-bed Derby City Council facility and a large 3-bed detached charity care home on a narrow 100-metre cul-de-sac providing care for people who require 24/7 supervision and all the associated special needs, traffic and disability staff shift changes, all the neighbours have been resilient in living with. However, the situation has worsened since the arrival of J24's business and negatively involves countless police arrests, staff shift changes, tagging staff, social worker and tutor traffic visits. Moreover, violent disturbances involving smashing of furniture and threatening of J24 staff, all of which our children and our relatives are exposed to. Homeowners then have to experience all the banging and drilling when repairing the damaged furniture in the morning. J24's planning proposal suggests modes of transportation to commute to work. In short, they do not park cars as per their proposal, as they don't want their cars damaged by their client as he exits after explosive and witnessed arguments. Derby City planners are being misled. Another example of not adhering to their proposal, staff get out of the taxis at the top of Cortland Gardens and then walk to the LEC house. This is all on CCTV, creating the illusion of simply walking to work. Taxis still have to drive in the road, causing noise and disturbance. Derby City planners are being misled. For the entire 6 months of operating, J24's business have refused meaningful and accurate dialogue with the residents. All the homeowners are being misled and lied to. Planning conditions will not work with J24. J24's business choice of a narrow, bottleneck cul-de-sac with 2 other care facilities forces and funnels everyone to walk past an oppressive security establishment. Moreover, an argumentative and swearing client with an observed continuous interaction of police officers making an arrest, all of which compound the negative visual and well-being impact on homeowners. Even the Derbyshire Police Designing Out Officer recommends refusal of planning. To a layperson reading the recommendations of planning, an area could be argued as either 100 miles, 10 miles, or even 1 mile. However, we already have 2 busy care and supervision establishments in a 100-metre cul-de-sac. There are more staff in Cortland Gardens than homeowners. There are more service users than there are homeowners in Cortland Gardens. We are not a residential area anymore. This is a saturation and dominance personified. To rely on the police and homeowners with planning conditions after too many disturbing violent incidents is not cost-effective and certainly not appropriate. Private residents have witnessed for far too long now J24's only one client trespassing, shouting and swearing at the 3 vulnerable adults at the charity care home just 5 metres away, and at the 16 special education needs clients at the other care home just 30 metres away, resulting in police investigations. The police have objected, a member of Parliament has objected, every single neighbour has objected. Everything we say here tonight is on evidence and cameras. Please, can you also object? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Wills. Julie, would you like to come back on any of those points before we go to committee? Can you switch? Oh, Julie, would you like to come back on any of those points? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So, I mean, obviously, just to stress that it's not illegal for a use to commence, and within planning legislation, there's nothing to stop an applicant from submitting planning permission retrospectively. Again, just to stress that we don't have any local plan policies that seek to restrict the number of care homes within a certain area. It's understood that the existing care facilities in the area are operating under a C3B use, which effectively you can change a normal house to. You can have an element of care within that house. So you can have adults living together as a single household, and it doesn't require a change of use. So the existing houses in the street could be changed to a certain supported living facilities without requiring a change of use.
There's no questions from the public gallery, I'm afraid. I'm sorry. Thank you. There's no more questions. Mr Shanker, Mr Wills, you've had your 3 minutes, I'm afraid. Sorry.
No. Sorry.
The planning officer is explaining the situation, Mr
Sorry,
Shanker.
just
Thank
to
you.
stress, I think that obviously a lot of the neighbour objections have raised concerns about the neighbouring property being used for, already being used for adults with learning difficulties. That type of use doesn't necessarily need a change of use from a planning perspective. So they operate within a C3 use. So they aren't uses that we necessarily have control over. But although we have had regard for the fact that obviously there are existing uses in the area that provide supported living.
Mr Shanker, this is the Planning Control Committee. There's no further questions, I'm afraid. No, there's no further questions. You've had your 3 minutes, just like everybody else does in the Planning Committee when they come. So thank you very much. If you could keep to that, please.
I mean, again, just to stress that unfortunately through the planning process we can't control the behaviour of the child. It is a residential use. And, you know, in typical family homes, you have obviously children who misbehave. I appreciate there being issues, but it's not something we can control through the planning process. So we're looking at the general use and obviously considering things like comings and goings, traffic, etc., rather than any of the wider behavioural issues of the individual. I think that's it, Chair.
Thanks, Julie. Committee. Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On the face of it, and as we know, when we're dealing with applications, we have had similar ones before on this scale. But today, we've received photographs and emails from residents with actual evidence of what's going on Cortland Gardens, and I've actually been to the site, so I know the area. And if this was in my ward and my residents were having to put up with this, I would be speaking against this because it's a residential amenity. We've had situations like this before where we have the management plan and it's up to that company, whoever it is, to manage the site in a responsible manner. It's mentioned throughout the report that it's a draft management plan. So is it still a draft or have we got an actual management plan? In my view, this is unacceptable in a residential area. And what's different with this application is that we have got the evidence that has been sent to the councillors this afternoon showing the various situations that the three speakers have mentioned. So I think we have got grounds to refuse this, firstly on a community safety aspect, secondly unacceptable behaviour, The police, as has been referred to, are against it, if you look at page 18, 5.3. I'm not quite sure about our environmental health colleagues with their comments, noise and disturbance increase, that they are saying that they do not think this is unacceptable. Well, I actually do. It is unfair for the residents to have to put up with this situation, and it's not something that I, or presumably anybody who wants to live in the neighbourhood where they reside and have a good quality of life. In my view, this isn't acceptable. We have got the evidence from the people who are resident in that street, and I think we ought to refuse this application totally due to the unacceptable management of the site. And we've also heard, obviously, they have been operating without proper planning consent. And in my view, I'm very, very concerned about this. If we do let this go through this evening, the repercussions this could have on firstly, us as corporate parents. And we are made well aware that we are corporate parents. I actually did a corporate parenting visit last night to one of our establishments in the south of the city, where there are no issues whatsoever. Reading this document and seeing the evidence we have, this is a totally different ball game. And I get it that it depends on the children and the dynamics in a home. I get it that you need the care and the provision of quality care. I've gone into all that, but I'm not happy with this application. I would move refusal.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. This application reminds me of one that quite a lot of members of the committee will remember, which was in the Manor Kingsway area, where, again, the use had started significantly before the application came in, and there were significant problems with local residents about parking and obstruction and activities and comings and goings at all times of day and night. The situation here is different because this is actually an adopted highway, but it is also different because it is a much more restricted location. It's a very tight cul-de-sac. There's a lot less movement. There is a lot less space between the properties to the other side of the road and the like. So it is similar, but it is different. But I think we can learn from that. And one of the things is the management condition and the way it's managed, and whether or not it can actually work in a location like this. What we're being told is that there might be one visit per day, per child, on a timed basis. But that is not what local people are reporting. Local people are reporting a much more chaotic arrangement of visits, comings and goings, sometimes police with blue lights flashing. Sometimes there's disturbance going on either side. Yes, any household, including teenagers or even younger children, can be chaotic at times. But this one is in a tight cul-de-sac, and we have an opportunity to actually be looking at it and making sure that it works for neighbours. At the moment, it isn't working for neighbours, and as Councillor Shanker said, this is an opportunity where we actually can see what is happening before we actually make a decision. However, I am really concerned because the report and the recommendation from officers is not to refuse. The applicant would go to appeal, and the inspector may well come to the conclusion that the evidence that he's got in front of him, which is what's in the report, is not strong enough to be able to, for him to reject it. It's the way we, as already been said, think it ought to be rejected. My proposal is therefore that we actually need to defer this. We need to take a closer look at what we want in terms of a management plan, and not just say it needs submitting, but it needs to be agreed and it needs to be able to be delivered to. I want us to be able to have something here that if it goes ahead, we can say they are not able to restrict the number of vehicle movements to the the staff movements, 4 in the morning, 4 in the evening, plus 1 visitor per child per day. And I'm sure that local people will be more than capable of identifying the number of actual comings and goings that take place during the day. And we would therefore, there would be evidence that they would gather for planning enforcement to be able to take action and to change what is happening. We don't have a management plan yet, so we can't make that judgment. But the management plan doesn't just need submitting, it needs agreeing, and it needs to be delivered to. And that is my main reason why we shouldn't be deciding it today. We should be deferring it and making sure that we've got a strong enough case so that if it were to be approved on appeal, we would be able to enforce the use and not have this sort of chaos happening.
Thanks, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Kerr has, I know this other speakers, but Councillor Kerr has mentioned she'd like a deferral. Would you like to propose that? And if there's enough...
I'm happy to propose deferral.
Do we have a seconder for a deferral of this for a later for another meeting?
Sorry, just to come in, Chair. I think if members want to discuss between themselves openly sort of whether they want to defer the matter as a starting point, and then if they want to appoint a seconder, then so be it.
Councillor Bonser, do you want to come in?
Yeah, my concern, I suppose, is that I feel that, I mean, this isn't what I was going to say previously, but on the subject of deferral, is that with all due respect, what we're hearing in terms of the experience of residents in connection with highways issues, for example, isn't reflected in the report. So if we refuse this application and it goes to appeal, and then that's considered based on the document that we've been presented with, I don't at this moment now feel confident that that reflects the situation as it is. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to any of our colleagues, but if we refuse it, which I'm at this stage minded to do, then can you just advise me, would the appeal be based on the document that we've been issued with tonight, in which case there's a chance, isn't there, that the inspectors would approve it? Can I just have that guidance, please? Does that make sense?
It does,
yeah.
Well, just to say, if it did go to appeal, the inspector would have sight of the objections received. So if that's your concern, that, yeah, so that would be part of the information that would be submitted to the planning inspectorate.
I think just to add into the sort of equation, it's if you're making a decision that is against officer advice, and it's better to have evidence. Julie's obviously referred to objections, but it's probably better to have further evidence to support that objection. So by deferral, you would be able to gather that if you needed that tonight. If you're satisfied with what the objectors have said on the evidence, and you think it's sufficiently robust and stands up, then fine, you can proceed on that basis. But if you want to make a more robust case in terms of, or have more robust evidence on the highways, then there's always the benefit of deferral for that. But it's for members to decide whether they think that they have sufficient information tonight to justify that reason for refusal.
We do Councillor Rawson and then Councillor Holmes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, obviously the management plan is one aspect of the consideration, but it's, I think the other aspects of the information that we have are perhaps equally relevant in terms of the physical layout of the street, the other facilities in the area. So personally, I feel I have enough information to make a decision and wouldn't feel the need to defer. Just my view, Chair.
Chris, do you want to come back on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Not really got a great deal to add. As we've said in the report, we consider that the use of the property in highway terms is not significantly different to the use of the property as a residential dwelling. I've been on the site 4 times, colleagues have been on the site. We've not, sorry, not on the site, in the area. We've not seen any parking problems. That's not to say they don't exist, but we can only comment on what we have physically seen. The latest time I was there was this morning, not even a single car parked on the street.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. Have a huge amount of sympathy for the residents in the public gallery. As you're probably aware, there was, if you can remember, there was a similar issue in Micklova with a care facility. Councillor Patterson, who wasn't a member of the planning committee at the time, spoke passionately about the issues that we experienced in our ward. And the committee were minded to pass that in that case. It seems the opposite tonight. One question though, this application seeks permission to use the existing house, which is C3, as a small-scale children's home, which is C2, which would accommodate up to 2 children. Can officers confirm how many children C2 use class actually allows? Because if the application is agreed tonight, and the application states 2 children, wouldn't C2 permission allow more without the need to return to the planning authority?
Julia?
There's a suggested condition to restrict it to 2 children and restrict the use to a children's care facility, so no wider C2 uses could be used. So that would restrict it. So unless that condition were removed, then that would limit the use.
So a suggestion condition, just explain to me how robust that is. If the applicant wishes to increase past 2, what would the mechanism be? Just to clarify that, please.
So they'd have to come back in with a new planning application to either vary the permission or the condition, or vary the permission with a fresh planning application. So we would have to consider whether it was acceptable or not.
That'd be a full planning application.
It could be a Section 73 application to just vary the condition, but it's a planning application. Consultation would be carried out, and obviously we would, if there were concerns, it could potentially be rejected.
So that would follow the same mechanisms and pathway that a regular full application would, so it wouldn't just be delegated by officers to make a decision. For example, if a ward councillor called it in, we would deal with it appropriately.
Yeah, there's the same level of consultation, and again, yes, it could be called in, and if a certain number of objections are received, it would go to committee, so yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Amin and then Councillor Prosser.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, I have to agree with what Councillor Rawson said. We have enough evidence here to show us that this can't go on. I mean, we have to refuse this. We have enough evidence, obviously, photograph evidence as well. There's no guarantee at all, obviously, it's a small cul-de-sac. And there's no guarantee from the carers saying that there won't be enough cars coming into that place. We have the same issue in Blakely's ward, where there's staff coming in and out, and they have more than enough cars coming in. and it is causing problems, especially for a cul-de-sac. So I have to say I have to refuse this.
Thank you. Councillor Prosser.
All right, I'll be a little while. This is one of those where I'm really disappointed that we can't get to see the objections against this. It was removed a while ago, and it really frustrates me. So we don't actually get to see the statements people have put in, and that's really not helpful in this case. The same with the police officer's report. The police officer's summary and why he objects has been omitted from this, and I would really like to see what the police officer said, because I think it's probably really important and has a real bearing on this. Also, I know that certain people have tried to submit further information to be displayed tonight, and that hasn't happened, and that's really frustrating, because otherwise we would have seen a wealth of information on the screen, some of which has been emailed, but I know that residents have a tremendous backpack and history on this, and they've not been allowed to present that properly tonight, so that's a real shame too. There's also two things about this application that really quite shock me and are really not helpful. So, first, entirely funded by the council, we've placed a very difficult child in a care facility without any planning permission and without that facility being registered. So it's a retrospective application for care facility catering for extreme cases. The last care home we passed had prior residential consultation, a better location, and a provider that understood and respected due process, something that I stated at the time I respected. This provider has shown no respect for due process, which, when it comes to childcare, is extremely concerning. It opened without consent and is still not listed with Ofsted as a service provider. We used to flag and raise concern about retrospective applications and chastise them openly in the chamber. I'm flagging this one now. It's not acceptable. I know that officers might try and disagree, but based on clear guidance, the current use does require planning permission, and this is a retrospective application. And actually, you've said that. Secondly, obviously, the residents have been severely impacted, so much so that within 24 hours of it being occupied, every resident on the street had contacted me. I've never seen such a swift and concerned reaction from residents. It was because it very quickly became apparent just how invasive this facility was going to be upon their lives. So the situation is now escalated instead of settling to a very serious challenge to daily life for the residents. Multiple households are involved in sensitive government roles that directly conflict with this property's new use, while many other extremely vulnerable people are living in this location at the adjoining care facilities with considerable support. The inappropriate use of this facility for the extreme childcare has impacted them all. So the report also states the current lawful use is 3 bedrooms. I've said I don't believe it's current, it's not its use, and actually you've said it's not its use, it's a C2, so it's not currently a family home. So the report's slightly wrong there, but you changed that in your statement. But it's not registered with Ofsted, and it doesn't currently have planning. So also, the change of use does not constitute an unreasonable increase in potential on-street parking is what is in the report. For anyone that visited the site, you'll know that as you drive into the street, it's not wide enough to park on the road without restricting emergency access. It's just wide enough for 2 cars to squeeze past. And when you reach the turning circle, you're not legally allowed to park. If you do stop anywhere, you stop vehicles from turning or residents from accessing their drives. It's so bad that carers from number 3 have already damaged the front of residents' gardens by driving on their lawns. The facilities cause tremendous issues, which our speaker today wanted to demonstrate, and I've gone into that. He's not been allowed, which is unfortunate. As for the drive at number 3, it has remained unused because parking in it is so tight and difficult, especially at staff changeovers where multiple cars are present. Staff have also expressed fears for the safety of their cars from the tenant. The drive has also often been blocked by building waste as repairs are undertaken. Staff have even taken to abusing other private car parks on the street to hide their vehicles. There is nowhere to park on Cortland Gardens for any respectable driver. Anybody parked either blocks the pavement, impedes vehicles like ambulances, fire engines, bin lorries, and delivery drivers. It's a safety matter and a severe amenity matter, which leads to the next point, visitors. The management plan outlines any expected visitors will be throughout the day between 7 and 5 on an appointment basis. This is not dissimilar to the current use, is what the report says. The daily increase does not appear to be significant. Its current use, without appropriate permissions, taking the plan at face value, I can understand it, right? But unfortunately, the daily grind would challenge the validity of the plan, which makes no mention of the number of police visits at all times of day and night with blue lights and lots of noise. There has been sometimes a twice daily occurrence, which is why the police themselves have recommended refusal in this case. It is very rare for the police to take such a stance, and it is due to the loss of amenity of the residents that such a recommendation has been made. Unfortunately, we are not party to see what the police report. Not based on future potential, but lived experience with this facility and its current operator. Proven and harmful loss of amenity to the residents of this close. This is not on a scale associated with normal domestic occupation, as such things often burn themselves out. This is regular and without a foreseeable end should the facility continue. Our repeat is based on lived experience, theft, trespass, intimidation, and the frequency and type of incidents at this property. The police have recommended refusal at a sensitive location due to loss of amenity. While environmental services have made no reference to current issues, which is disappointing because they're fully aware, the noise from the property and offensive, often racist music is very disturbing to residents on the street. And to make it worse, the staff refused to resolve it, allowing the child in care to continue. The statement in the report says that staff will monitor it. Monitoring isn't good enough, it needs controlling. In a normal family environment, these controls are often enforced naturally, but due to the care being provisioned, the norms here don't apply. And it's not only disturbing the residents of the street, but having a wider impact on the neighbouring care facilities. Environmental health are unable to sort these things as it's very difficult to police. Here we have a proven, regular problem. Neighbours are also experiencing rubbish thrown into their rear gardens from the site, which when challenged, the staff refuse to remove on health and safety grounds. Finally, the property on the corner and number 1 Cortland Gardens are already specialist residences with all the comings and goings that entails. They include around 20 units and during their operation have been mostly peaceful and in harmony with the surrounding residents. The new development not only impacts the regular domestic residents of Cortland Gardens, but the lives of many who are already struggling with day-to-day life. This is a very, very sensitive location. It's a retrospective application for a facility that has shown no regard for process, no respect for neighbours. It's not the scale of the facility, but the content. These are not average children in care, and this quiet, sensitive and very tight cul-de-sac is not a suitable location for this type of facility. The situation is so bad, the police, after many, many visits, have recommended refusal because the residents are clearly suffering a proven and extreme loss of amenity. This is very a difficult facility in completely the wrong place. It's a bit like an incinerator in the middle of the city, for example. We must reject this.
Thank you, Councillor Prosser. Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask if we've cleared up the issue of the deferral, as I'd like to speak on the substantive.
I think we've gone through the deferral. I don't think anyone...
Okay.
We didn't get a seconder.
Okay. So, the first thing, Chair, to say, I think, is that it's perfectly possible for children's residential homes to work in residential settings, and it's actually most beneficial for children to be placed in that type of environment. However, the crucial thing is the location and whether the property concerned has the infrastructure around it to be able to properly support it. And as a committee, we've considered similar proposals in the past, and we look at each one on its merits. And indeed, I've voted both ways for and against in the past. This particular application that comes before us this evening, though, raises a number of serious concerns for me. First of all, I think we do need to consider the over-concentration of buildings which have been adapted from their original purpose. And that is mentioned in the report. There are two large buildings situated at the entrance of the cul-de-sac, one which has been subdivided into flats. I don't know whether that's an HMO or not, but either way, it's a property which instead of supporting one family unit is now supporting multiple units, and we know from previous experience that that does bring additional issues to the area. And also we have Pine Court as well, which is providing supported living for adults with special needs, which probably on their own in isolation would operate perfectly well. But here we're being asked to consider a cul-de-sac where there are just 11 houses, whether now a third property would be converted from its original purpose, bringing more complex living arrangements. So roughly a quarter of those properties, if this is approved, would have been adapted from their original purpose. So that is whilst on its own isn't a deal breaker, it is a material consideration. Which moves us on to highways issues, and again we accept the report from highways officers, and they have their way of measuring traffic and making a recommendation. But we have to look at the individual circumstances, and often if there's the capacity to accommodate staff and visitors within the curtilage of the property concerned, then that's telling you that there may not be too many problems associated with that application. However, in this case, whilst I think it mentions two vehicles on the drive and one in the garage, we're then told that because of the restrictions in the size of the garage and the driveway, it's probably only possible to utilise one vehicle. So we're looking at probably at least two others vehicles being permanently displaced onto on-street parking. And that's before we consider if there's an additional child taken at the property. Again, perhaps on its own, it may be manageable, but looking at the cumulative impact of lack of parking within the curtilage, plus the other facilities nearby, you're starting to build up a lot of pressure on what is a very narrow residential street, and from the photographs we've seen, it looks like that you can probably only get one vehicle along there at a time, which is then displacing vehicles onto the pavement and even onto private property, as we've heard. There are no parking restrictions, again, which rings alarm bells if it was an application on a street, maybe in the city centre, where there's pay and display or residence parking, then there's an element of management there in place, and you'd have greater confidence that parking on that street would be able to be managed. Again, in this case, that's not the case. And finally, we come to residential amenity, which I think is, in planning terms, accepting the issues that the residents have said, absolutely, they sound horrendous, but we have to consider in planning terms and make our decision on those grounds. And had the applicant, I think, sought planning permission before opening the facility, then those issues of noise and disturbance probably wouldn't have been a planning issue, because they wouldn't have occurred, and the committee would not have taken those into account, quite rightly. However, as this is a retrospective application and we do have the evidence of a negative impact on residents, it therefore does become an issue of residential amenity and the impact on neighbours, which we can fully take into account. Just finally to finish, I think the comment from the police as a designated organisation putting forward their comments, it is very rare that the police recommend refusal, and as has already been said, we can't see the exact details of that, but it is a very real consideration that the committee should need to take. So weighing all of those up, I think they all contribute to a lack of a deterioration of residential amenity for residents in the area when we consider all of those things together, and I'll be voting to refuse. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rawson. Go to the vote. Councillor Baldwin.
Yeah, I moved when I spoke, Chair, that this application be refused. So I don't know if that's seconded.
Move the recommendation to refuse, and Councillor Bolton, is that what you...
Sorry, Chair. Committee's got to actually make a decision on the recommendation first before we move to deciding against it.
So we will vote on the recommendation, so that's going to be...
The recommendation is to grant the application. Yes. So I think it's a question of all who's in favour of that, Chair.
So,
Chair, on that point, there's reference made to the standard management conditions for something like this. The standard wording, I think, is that which was agreed for the children's home at Upper Hollow. That gives no limit to the amount of parking or the sort of, it says, talked about parking management provisions. For me, this is the most critical thing about this site. And I just feel that we want to have management conditions that would be enforceable should this go to appeal and be approved by an inspector. So can we ensure that the management conditions are stronger than that which went about the Upper Hollow place? Thank you.
Is that okay, Julie? Noted, Councillor Kerr. We will put this to the vote then. So the application is to be granted, so all those in favour of granting the application? I'd say that's none. So, all those against?
Unanimous.
Unanimous, yes. Thank you, Committee.
And then you've got to move to
yes.
Decision to...
Yes, Chair, if I could just elaborate on the reasons for my refusal. Policies GD5, E24, H13, the fact that the police have objected as well, obviously highways on grounds as well. So if there are any other policies that the officer would like to direct me to, then clearly I will listen to the officer. But clearly those are the policies I've written down instantly. But I'm willing to expand on that. Sorry, GD5, E24 and H13. And I've also put, obviously mentioned the police with their objection and also insufficient highways capacity. But I'm willing to listen if anybody else wants anything including.
Can you summarise what those numbers mean?
GD5 is amenity, E24 is community safety, and H13 is residential.
You You can. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. The tone of the discussion has been the injurious impact on residential amenity in terms of general disturbance, noise, antisocial behaviour. So those policies would support those reasons. You've also suggested the insufficient parking arrangements and poor highway conditions. Clearly, Chris Thorley has provided his specialist advice on that point. Did you want to include that in the reasons for refusal, or are you confining it to residential amenity by virtue of those impacts? That's for you to discuss.
Yeah, I think, Chair, yeah, we need to look at the evidence that we've received today from the residents, and clearly it does show inadequate highway amenity, and the fact that there are police vehicles and fire engines actually on the site as well. This is all evidence, in my view, that will help the situation if this goes to appeal. Yep. I'm willing to take the officer's advice.
Well, yeah, I mean, if that's members' agreement, then it would be essentially two reasons. The amenity reason being at the fore in terms of, as I say, injurious impact on residential amenities by virtue of general disturbance, noise, comings and goings, late night activity, etc. And then the second reason being the insufficient parking arrangements, the narrow carriageway width of Cortland Gardens, the impact on existing neighbouring vehicles and vehicular movement, and the relevant policies in the development plan, which is CP23. So we'd quote those. We can flesh those out and agree them with the chair. Sorry, Councillor Bonser, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, is it worth us including a comment around how mindful the committee have been to take into account the police recommendation?
That would actually support the amenity issue element, such as again, Councillor Prosser also sort of mentioned about the impact on the vulnerability of the residents as well, which supports that element as well.
So we'll take a vote now on
Councillor Bolton recommended refusal on those grounds. We need a second on that.
So Councillor Walton, Councillor Kerr second. Yes. All those in favour of refusal of the application on those grounds? Oh, yeah. Unanimous. Unanimous, yes. Thank you very much, committee.
We need a nominated member to represent.
Can we have a volunteer for representing? I'm looking at Councillor Bolton now.
An appeal
representative. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, speakers. Thank you very much. We now go on to item 8, potential future site visits. Ian, you can borrow my microphone. Yes, you can.
I blame the technicians around here. Okay, Chair, we've got 5 items. First item, land at Kingsway Hospital. It's just a variation of condition.
Well, I would know on that one, I would have thought. Yep, we're okay on that one.
Just changing the ground floor arrangement. The second one is Ocor Package 2, another variation of condition. Now, again, some technical detail changes to walls, position of flood defence measures. There's a scheme overview plan online if you were interested in that. Look for scheme overview plan. There are a number of documents on there, so I'd suggest you just take a look at that because it's all up and down the lower reaches of the Ocor package.
Yep.
Third one, land off Infinity Parkway, Derby. There's a reserve matters application for access works. You can see that from the public zone. The fourth one, we've had extensive pre-application discussions over this. Pear Tree Infant School, it's rebuilding the school, resiting it from one side of the site to the other. We're going through negotiations over position of building, style of building, scale of building, be it biodiversity, net gain, etc. But you can see that from the public zone on four sides. Drury Lane car park, we've had a scheme there, granted permission, it's a variation, it's for very small layout and design changes, so only small potatoes on that one. And Derby College, much the same, an improved scheme, and we're looking to relocate some compounds and the reduction in size of a compound associated with that development. So it's, again, small potatoes, Chair. Thank you. Nothing else to add on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. And that's it. Thank you, everybody, for taking part tonight. See you in December for the, I think it's December the 12th, for the next one. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Good night.